What's good, y'all? It's your boy BioSpider 3.0, keeping the action going with the Ultimate Spider-Man comic, issue 21. This is Hunted. So, we are going to finally start that lot of Ultimate Spider-Man comics. I did read the first two issues and the lot that I got, so this is the first one, the lowest number in the list, and it is a pretty cool story. So, I thought we'd do just kind of like a read through or like a quick summary. Obviously, we're not going to read it word for word, but I'm just going to tell you the gist of what's happening in each scene, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. I'll give you my thoughts on it at the end. But yeah, overall, I did really enjoy this story a lot, and I am liking the overall style of the Ultimate Spider-Man comics quite a bit. So yeah, we're gonna get right into it. We got our writer, Brian Michael Bendis, and then we have the artist, of course, Mark Bagley, who is one of my favorite Spider-Man artists. So shout outs to Bagley, shout outs to Bendis. And then Thibault, I think, is responsible for either writing or penciling. I can't quite remember, but he's responsible for something major in this issue right here. So taking a look, opening it up to the first page. This gives us basically like a really good recap of what happened in the previous issue, which, obviously I don't have. So, yeah, basically I'm glad that they actually included this, because when I first read it, I kind of skipped this part and I didn't exactly know what was going on in in the issue. It just kind of started off, like already into the scene, and I was kind of lost. I was like, dang, what's going on like with all of this? But then when I reread it, I read this recap, and it basically breaks it down. So it says previously, and of course you can see all your writers up here. Spidey recap. You got all the people involved. Brian Michael Bendis for the script, Mark Bagley for pencils, Art Thibault for inks, transparency, digital colors, shape fonts, Dave Sharp letters, Brian Smith associate editor, Ralph Macchio editor. We have Joe Quesada, editor-in-chief, and then Bill James, or Hamas, I don't know, president and inspiration. So it says previously, and you can see we've got some character people on the side. We've got Peter Parker, Mary Jane Watson, Gwen Stacy, Aunt May, Dr. Octopus, and of course Kraven, and previously an Ultimate Spider-Man. So it gives us a quick summary. It says, before Dr. Octopus can hurt anyone, Spider-Man battles him to the finish on live television. But before Spidey can recover from the difficult battle, Kraven the Hunter's tour bus pulls up. Kraven throws down the challenge to fight. So yeah, that's basically right where we pick up, where the story picks up and takes off. So here we go, page 1. All right, so in this scene, yeah, we start off basically, Spidey's like at some event, this thing that's being hosted on like live television, and then you can see, Kraven is pulling up right here. He says, our time has come, insect, our battle is now. You see Spidey, you see all these reporters taking photos and, catching it all. And then, basically Spider-Man is just kind of ignoring Kraven, and then he's trying to get Kraven to actually focus on these people that are trapped in this car right here. You can see there's a lady and a guy trapped in the car right there, and Spidey's basically checking on them, trying to make sure they're okay. And then he tells Kraven, he's like, why don't you help me, like, actually help these people out real quick? And Kraven isn't trying to hear any of that. And Spidey's notices one of the guy in the car with the girl seems like he's kind of unresponsive, and then the girl kind of tells him, oh, I think he's dead. Like, it kind of seems like he had a heart attack. He might be dead. So Spidey's trying to, look further into the situation, try to get them out the car. But Kraven is still obviously focused on trying to fight Spider-Man. So his whole thing is, he's like telling him like, we're going to battle right now. And then Spider-Man's like, no, we're not. And he's like, yes, we are. And then he's like, are you kidding me? So yeah, it comes over here, and basically Kraven just charges at him, tries to rush him, starts swinging wildly at Spider-Man. Spider-Man's just basically dodging, all of Kraven's attacks and just kind of, treating him like a joke. You can see he's dodging, pushing his fist out of the way, and Kraven swinging wildly, just totally missing. And Spidey's like, man, what the heck's going on? Like, what are you doing? Like, can you like knock it off, basically, right? And then we, oh yeah, so like in the middle here, we get a look at another comic, I guess, that came out. We have Captain America: The New Deal by John Reber and John Cassaday for the Marvel Knights. And then look at that, Lunchables. That's how you know this is old. I think this comic, I think it said in the beginning it came out in like June of 2002. So yeah, this is a very, you know, old issue, but you know, make your fun. You got Lunchables, the pizza Lunchables. So there you go. All right. And then we got a dope. This is like one of the most iconic movie posters for the first Spider-Man, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. Go for the ultimate spin, 3rd of May. That's when a lot of Marvel movies came out back in the day. It was always easy for me to remember because, you know, my best friend's birthday is that day. And I have another friend whose birthday is that same day. So, yeah. But anyways, yeah, we're coming over here. So basically, you know, Kraven keeps trying to go at Spidey. Spidey gives him a good punch to the face and kind of, you know, knocks him into his tour bus. And Kraven's, you know, kind of knocked out for a little bit. All right, so we come over here. And then, you know, we've got, we've got all these people watching with the cameras and like the reporters. And Spidey's like, you know, I told him, you know, not to. I told him to drop it. Like you guys all saw. And people are like, you know, this guy over here is like, Kraven? You know, Crave, baby? And so they're trying to like check on Kraven. And then, you know, he's talking about sleepy. He's super dazed from the punch. And so, you know, Spider-Man's just kind of going along with whatever's going on. And then he remembers that the people are still trapped in the car. So his attention goes back to the car. He tells the lady inside, you know, if she can move, basically reach out her hand so that he can grab her and pull her out. And so she's able to do that. He finally gets her out of the car. And then all of the people that are witnessing, you know, start clapping, all the reporters and, you know, all the civilians and bystanders, they all just start giving him a round of applause. And, you know, he's kind of confused. And, you know, one of the reporter ladies goes up to him and she basically, you know, asked him, like, how did you know Justin Hammer? Or, you know, or did you know Justin Hammer? And then, you know, Spidey replies, not really. And then she's basically praising Spider-Man for, you know, saving the people and saying that, you know, that was amazing. And then he's like, well, not really, you know, 2 people died. I guess one of them being the guy that was in the car. And then, let's see, what are they talking about right here? Oh, yeah. He trashed you in the press. Oh yeah, so I guess, you know, somebody was trying to like basically tell Spider-Man like, oh well, like, you know, what's it called? Freak it. So my bad. I think it was Justin Hammer that they were talking about right here when they said, but he trashed you in the press. He tried to blame you for all of this. And, you know, Spidey's replying, well, yeah, but that has nothing to do with this. It's sad when someone dies for no good reason like that. So basically, Spidey's saying, like, you know, he doesn't have any vengeance or, like, you know, hard feelings towards Justin Hammer for trying to slam his reputation because, you know, obviously Spider-Man is very used to that. And then we come over here, back to this reporter lady, and she's kind of, you know, asking questions again. And she tells him, well, it's just that we don't really know anything about you. And she said, maybe if you talked with us for a second, you know, since we're on live TV right now. And that was the first time that, you know, anybody had mentioned the fact that they were alive. And so Spider-Man was kind of like taken aback by that. He said, we are. And then she says, you know, we have been this entire time. The Otto Octavius fight, the Kraven business, it all went out live. But everyone wants to know, who are you? And then he says, well, I'm from a planet many galaxies far, far away from where people and spiders mate and live in harmony. And the lady's like, what? And he's like, oh, I'm just joking. You know, typical Spidey stuff. And then he says, I'm just like this guy. And, you know, he's pointing to Doc Ock, who's, you know, over there on the ground all webbed up and knocked out. He says, I fell backwards into some powers and I'm trying to do what I can so that people like that don't try to hurt people like you. And then she says, but why wear a mask? And then, oh yeah, over here, not to skip this part, but basically he's just kind of like, you know, climbing up the pole. And like before they get into all that questioning, she basically just asks him, you know, she's just basically, again, praising him and all that. And by him being sarcastic, he replies, well, to return the favor, just make sure somebody calls me a mutant freak and tries to blame me for the whole thing, because obviously that's what he's used to. But yeah, then we come over here, and then and now you can see this in this shot right here. You can see Mary Jane's actually watching the whole thing from home, like wherever she's at. She's watching it on the TV. And so, Spider-Man's replying to her about, like, why wear a mask? He says, well, it's no big conspiracy or anything. I just want to do what I can for people. But I have family and friends, and I don't want to, like, put their lives in danger just because they know me. I want to protect them, so yeah, I wear a mask. It's pretty simple, really. But people might have a hard time trusting someone dressed like this. That's how the reporter replies. To which he responds, well, I have a hard time trusting people who wear those hats with a beer can on each side. So he says, listen, I know it's corny, but the outfit means something to me. And yeah, he says, even though my wearing the mask might have idiots like that trying to use me to get attention for themselves, and people like that low J. Jonah Jameson at the Bugle trying to use me to sell papers by trashing the crap out of me all the time, I just don't care. And so she asked him, well, why don't you care? And he says, because a guy a whole lot smarter than any of us once told me that with power comes a great deal of responsibility. Obviously, the wise Uncle Ben. He says, and that's not just for people with powers like me. I think it goes for everybody. And so you can see him. He says, all right, listen, the cops are coming, so I'm out of here. Is everyone okay? And so, he's doing his last checks to make sure everybody at the scene is all right. To which, when everybody says they're all good, he's like, all right, well, see you. And he continues to flip up this pole and swing away. And I really do like the art style that Bagley does for these, where it kind of shows Spider-Man in like different frames of motion. I really like that a lot. So you can see him, like, this is probably the starting point where he first grabs onto the pole, swings around. Now you can see him back here, kind of in a, like he's behind the pole, and then he's forward again, shooting his web and swinging off in the distance. So I do like that Mark Bagley does that a lot for his Spider-Man action shots. All right, and so we come back over here. So Spider-Man is gone at this point, and the reporter is basically just saying, well, how's that for home run? Like, she's happy about all the footage that they got on the air and a little conversation that they did get out of Spider-Man. And so they're just basically kind of talking about that. And then you see people from Craven's tour bus coming off, and the cops are arresting them. So you can see Craven right here. And I believe this is Calypso behind him, who is like Craven's wife in the comics. So, you have Calypso there. And yeah, everybody's just kind of being detained. And then you see like some mysterious, kind of like black armored, very suspicious like looking trucks and vehicles pulling up, and it says, hold on, seems we have even more new arrivals to this tumultuous scene. And so you see this, I believe it's a lady. I'm pretty sure it's a lady, even though the face is drawn to look like a guy. I'm sure it's a guy in disguise. I think that's the point. But it says, this is Carter. We have a big fat PDA. We need a doggy bag ASAP. Agent Wu, make sure the Hammer building is secure. So I'm guessing that, wherever this event took place where Spider-Man battled with Dr. Octopus and then Kraven, got into it with him, is some kind of, Hammer Industries, some kind of facility or something that Justin Hammer owns. So he said, make sure the building is secure. We're going to clear the civilians and pick up the doctor. And so you got this guy, taking notes and listening. All right, coming over here. All right, so you can see all of these, agents, these secret agent looking people in these mysterious costumes kind of moving in onto the scene, and they're all going towards Dr. Octopus, getting ready to pick him up. And you can see that same guy or lady that got out of the truck. Now he or she is talking to the cops, and the cops are just kind of asking her, what is this guy? Like, what's going on here? And then, they respond, sorry to put the wool on you, officer, but it's classified. So if you'll just help us clear the area of civilians so we can quickly deal with this before innocent people get. And he cuts her off and says, sure, sure. And then the reporter lady is obviously still there, and she notices, everything that's going on and how suspicious these new arrivals look. So she says, excuse me, hello, are you FBI? Can you tell us what is going on here at Hammer Industries? What are you going to do with Otto Octavius? And then she says, and can you comment on some of the vague allegations Otto Octavius made here about genetic? And then before she can finish, the cameraman behind her says, Tracy, we lost the feed. And then all of a sudden you see, that same lady or man in disguise say, you lost your feed, as if, that was planned. And obviously he had something to do with that. And then we come over here. It says, sir, you're going to have to. And then he says, I'm going, basically telling them that they're going to have to leave the scene. So they already start to leave. And then we cut straight home to a shot of Peter basically arriving home, and you can tell it's very late at night. You can see like a full moon in the background. Peter's getting ready to walk through his front door, and he opens the door, and immediately he hears, where have you been? Which is, of course, coming from Aunt May. And then he says, geez, you scared me, Aunt May. And she asks him, do you know what time it is? He says, no. She says, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. To which, he pretends to look surprised, but even though he's well aware of how late it is. And then he says, seriously? Well, he says, wow, yeah, I was waiting on a train. And then she says, where were you? And he says, at the Daily Bugle. And then she says, really? Because I called over there and they said you hadn't come in all week. And he's like, what? And she says, where were you? He says, no, I was there. Of course I was there. He says, there are all kinds of people down at the Bugle. They don't all know me. He says, a lot of people think I'm just the kid. They probably had me mistaken with somebody else. Yeah. To which, she gets up from the table, giving him a very stern look because obviously she's not buying it. She comes over to him, pulls down his sleeve and asks, is this a bruise? And he's looking at her, trying to think of, his next lie. And he says, she again asks, where were you? He says, no, I fell at school. I got this in the gym. Those ropes. And she says, tell me the truth, Peter. Where were you? He says, I told you. And she says, I know a lie when I hear one. Where were you? And he says, uh-huh. Oh, no, he says, okay, all right. He says, okay, I was with Mary Jane. And she says, mm-hmm. And then he says, I didn't want to make you mad. To which she responds, I don't care if you respect me or not, young man, but as long as you're in this house, you will respect the rules of this house. He says, no, I told you. And she said, Mary's house is the first place I called. And now you can tell Aunt May is very angry. And you can see Peter's face, obviously, is kind of, shocked, not having much to say. And she goes in on him saying, do you think I'm stupid? Mary was home all night, but boy, was she trying to cover for your hide. She said you were at the library. So which was it, Peter? Were you at work or at the library or at Mary Jane's? She says, which stupid, insulting lie do you want to stick to? And then, Peter's obviously at a loss for words for a bit. And then he says, uh-huh. He says, I swear to God, Peter, if I find out you're in some kind of mischief with those idiot friends of yours at school. And then, he looks away and kind of smiles. And she says, oh, this is funny. And he says, no, what friends? And then she responds, haven't I grieved enough for one lifetime? Now I have to sit here and wonder what happened to you. She says, it's funny that I have to sit here and wonder if you're dead lying in a gutter somewhere. This nightmare of a city. And he says, no, and she cuts him off. She says, until you can figure out how to get home at a responsible hour and how not to lie to my face, guess what, kiddo? You're grounded. And he says, what? And she says, that's right. She's like, no more Bugle. What? No more Mary Jane gigglethons in the basement. Gigglethons took me out when I first read that. But yeah, no more hanging out with Mary Jane down in the basement laughing. She says, you go to school and you come home from school, a straight beeline to and from. And I will be calling your principal and your job to inform them of this as well. And he's like, come on. He's like, come on, Aunt May. Like, don't be tripping like that, you know? And she's like, yeah, come on. And she says, and if you can't figure out how to do this, I will call the cops on you myself. Is that understood? And he's like, yes, ma'am. All right. So, you know, Peter's taking the whooping right here. It's all a part of being Spider-Man. And then she says, now get out of my sight until you can figure out how to tell me the truth. And obviously, Peter's all grumpy about it, knowing, like, wishing he could tell her, but obviously he can't. And he just walks away towards his room, and you can see Aunt May just sitting at the table. And you hear slam, which I'm assuming is like him slamming the door to his room. And you know, Aunt May just looks all upset sitting down at the kitchen table. All right. So yeah, rough scene there. That scene honestly reminded me a lot of the first Amazing Spider-Man, when, you know, Peter comes home after chasing those guys that killed Uncle Ben, and his face is all scratched up, and, you know, Sally Field's Aunt May starts questioning him. Yeah, I love that scene. Definitely feels like a comic scene. You could tell that Mark Webb, who's like the director of those Amazing Spider-Man movies, definitely got a lot of influence from these Ultimate Spider-Man comics, down to like the design of the, you know, villains and the characters, the Spidey suit. Even I feel like the casting of Andrew Garfield for Peter Parker, definitely a lot of influence from the Ultimate Spider-Man comics. I would definitely say that. But yeah, so we come here. So Peter's in his room, you know, he's all upset, throws his backpack to his bed. He sits down, looks at his TV, turns it on. And then, of course, that same reporter lady that he saw at the, you know, Hammer Industries place, she says, are we back on the okay? If you can hear me, Tom, this was an amazing night here at Hammer Industries. Justin Hammer dead of a heart attack at age 67. So that's when we, you know, it's confirmed that the guy that died in the car that we saw earlier was in fact Justin Hammer. And so she says, Spider-Man, selflessly battling odds obviously not in his favor against both Otto Octavius and syndicated television personality Kraven the Hunter. Kraven the Hunter is under arrest, Otto Octavius in government custody, and Spider-Man giving the press the first look into what makes him tick. And she says, we'll be staying with this story until we get more answers as to what events shaped this fateful night in the, and, you know, and then Peter says, finally, big time superhero, and I'm grounded. So, of course, in typical Peter Parker fashion, things, you know, end up kind of not working in his favor, but it's all good because he's Spider-Man. He's going to bounce back. We know this. All right, so we come over here, and now we have a shot of Otto Octavius locked up in a, you know, facility. You can tell he's kind of like in a cell. You've got these green lasers basically kind of acting as bars, keeping him in there. And he's just kind of mumbling stuff to himself. He says, like, spiders, Spider-Man powers of a... And then he says, Spider-Man. And you can hear these people talking, you know, outside of the cell saying, so what do you think? And he says, I think I want what he's having. And so, yeah, you hear the people talking outside. One of those people you can tell is like the lady or guy that was in disguise before. And now you can see that other agent that was with him. And he says, I think when Fury gets back from wherever he is, he's going to rip us a new one. And so that right there, that one line confirms that these are S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, these two people that showed up to the scene and, you know, got Octavius back to this holding cell. And then he replies, at least we got Octavius back in custody. And, you know, the guy replies to him, on live television, sort of defeats the purpose of a covert operation. He says, but we confiscated Hammer's Jersey plant. And he goes, true. He says, all the illegal genetic experiments he was funding have been stopped. He's out of the picture for good. True. He says, we've done worse. And they zoom in on Doc Ock's face, and he's kind of like drooling over there. And then, you know, this lady says, no, we haven't. So, yeah, I guess it is a lady. It was kind of hard to tell from those earlier drawings, but yeah, I guess that is a lady. And she says, or the guy says, I'm going home. And the lady says, I'm going to go cry. And then the guy replies, I'm going home and drink myself unconscious. And she says, I'm going to go home, cry, then drink, then eat ice cream till I knock myself unconscious. And that's how you know that's a lady, because only girls say stuff like that, eating ice cream and crying, typically. And he says, "Can I come over?" And she says, "Sure." And now you see, as we're leaving the shot, that you see like just a sliver of Doc in his cell over here, and he's still mumbling, and then his words start to become, a little more clear here, and he's actually making phrases, and he says, "A Spider-Man, little spider on his shirt, spider powers, Spider-Man with spider, oh." And then he says, "Oh, oh no, 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 hello, I know who he is. I know who Spider-Man is. His name is Parker." And then boom, look at that Spider-Man Pop-Tart. Fire. All right, and then coming to the last page, we have a nice close-up of Doc looking all, again, still drooling, got the blindfold over his face. He says, "His name is Parker." And that is pretty much how this one ends. And this, we got a nice TV guide captures Spider-Man. We got this dope Spider-Man art of him swinging through the city. It says, "Get caught up in a web of excitement when TV guide captures Spider-Man." And yeah, it's just talking about some stuff over here. Put your hands on an exciting series of collectible Spidey covers quicker than you can say Green Goblin when the April 27 issue of TV Guide presents 5 Spider-Man covers. For unique linking TV Guide covers have been created. 4 unique linking TV Guide covers have been created by 4 classic illustrators: John Romita Sr., John Romita Jr., Mark Bagley, and Alex Ross, each representing a different web-slinger style and era. Plus, a 5th TV Guide cover features in costume Tobey Maguire, star of the upcoming movie Spider-Man. So yeah, again, this came out 2002, so the first Spider-Man wasn't even quite out yet. It says, "With great power, there must also come great responsibility," learns young Peter Parker. "You have the power to get this great TV Guide Spider-Man collection. Accept the responsibility to buy them all." So isn't that a marketing strategy right there? On sale wherever TV Guide is available. 1 week only, starting April 22nd. You can see right here on the side, trademarked and 2002 Marvel Characters Inc., all rights reserved. And yeah, that's basically how this issue 21 of the Ultimate Spider-Man ends. And so that's it. And I like that one. I thought it was like a really solid story overall. I really did enjoy it. I was confused, admittedly, the first time I read it, because I didn't read that recap in the beginning. And so I kind of didn't know like what was going on, like, where the story picked up at. But obviously it left off from the previous issue. And so, but I appreciate that they put that recap in there, because that definitely explained a lot. And yeah, so far I'm really liking the style of the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, like everything from the art to the storytelling. It's like, they don't have to put too much dialogue to get you to know what's going on, and they kind of, help you connect the dots pretty quickly as you read through each page, and obviously the artwork helps out with that. But yeah, really, really dope issue. Definitely recommend it. If you guys can find, this issue, if you're a Spider-Man comic reader or fan, I gotta say, comics are really, a dope part of being a fan of a character, the fandom. And I still have a lot of comics, not just Spider-Man comics, but we got like DC comics, Justice League comics, a whole bunch to read. A friend of mine actually gave me like a giant stack of comics before he left, the state. And so I got a whole bunch of those to read that, I'll be bringing all of those to the channel at some point. So looking forward to that. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this read through, just like, quick little summary of what was going on in that comic. And yeah, that's our first issue in the lot. So obviously I'm going to be reading the rest that I got, in that huge lot I got off from Mercari, and we're going to go in order, of course, so that the storyline makes sense. But yeah, so I am planning to have I'm going to shoot a review right after this for a figure that I've had for a little bit. And then tomorrow my plan is to finally drop the Maximum Series Spider-Man review. Okay, so be looking forward to that. That is one of my most exciting figures that I am just super stoked to review. Cannot wait to crack that one open and see what he can do. But yeah, man, if you're new to the channel and you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Feel free to share it. And yeah, leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. Did you enjoy this story? Now that we've kind of looked at it, do you have this comic? Do you have any other Ultimate Spider-Man comics? And if you do, what's one of your favorites, and why? And I'll be happy to, have a discussion down with you down there in the comments. But yeah, this has been your boy, BioSpider 3.0, and I'll see y'all in the next video, which is coming real soon. So thanks, and stay blessed. See y'all soon. Peace.